Welcome to another road trip brought to you by nydiners.com as we travel through New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia and see different sights all around these states. Our trip this time starts out at Gibby's Diner in Quaker Street, New York on Route 7 just outside of Duanesburg, New York. This Mountain View diner has very good food, as you see by an example here. Continuing down Route 7, we hopped onto Route 10, and this is a typical view of the upper Delaware Valley. Next, we stopped at the Red Rose Diner in Towanda, New York, which is a Tierney diner. And we look at Gordon Tyndall's new coffee grinder. And we also look at the Yellow Rose Diner, which is a Goodell diner. Continuing down US 6 going west, we found this big pump somewhere west of Troy, Pennsylvania. And then we found our way into Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, and this great Sterling diner that was brought here in 1939. Just west of downtown is an old Tasty Freeze called the Frog Hut. Continuing west to Coudersport, we come up to Fez's Diner. This Silk City has been really put into good shape and really just looks great. And in downtown Coudersport is their theater, and then just past that is an old caboose. Meandering over to US 219, we come to Du Bois, and we got Schenkel's Drug Store. We also have this neat oven found downtown next to a candy store. And then just south, headed towards US 119, is this old Highway Oil. But our next food stop wouldn't be until we hop onto US 22 and head west shortly to Dean's Diner, a Federo, in Blairsville. Next we have the Summit Diner in Somerset, Pennsylvania, near the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which is an early swingle built just before the environmental style. And then we hopped over to Uniontown, which is on the national highway known as US Route 40, and we have a couple neat buildings downtown, including their theater and a little park next door. Going west a little bit on the National Highway in Brownsville is the first Starlight that we will run into on this trip. Coming back, we stopped at a turnpike marker and a toll house. But it was south on US 119 and down to Morgantown to visit John Schoaf and his Valentine Diner. John brought me a little south to Fairmount, and we took some pictures of a neat bridge, a neon sign, DJ's Diner, our second Starlight, and then we took the interstates over to Huntington, and inside this nice looking building is an actual diner from possibly 1917. But we passed a Fro Stop drive-in along the way on Route 10 in West Virginia, and we stopped and had some food there and a root beer. And then going east on US 60 out of Huntington, we stopped at the oldest drive-in in Huntington, a Stewart's. On the way out of town, we saw an old Valentine that looked abandoned. Next we have the Red Line Diner, a homemade diner in St. Albans, just off the interstate. And then continuing on the interstate to the capital of West Virginia, we have a neat picture of the Capitol building itself. So the next day we started in White Sulphur Springs on the eastern end of the state at Vicky's Diner, a Valentine. Unfortunately, it was closed. But we took 219 south and passed a neat shopping mall sign, a covered bridge, and a rooster until we got down to Wytheville, Virginia on US 11, where we have Count's Drugstore and the Millwall Theater. We intended to go up US 11, but first we went down to the Hillsville Diner on US 58. This neat barreled roof diner was moved to town in 1948 and just has a counter. Back up to US 11, you can see the great view from the highway. And we passed a bunch of old gas stations and the Dogwood Lodge, all between Pulaski and Radford. And the fun didn't stop in Radford. We got this neat ghost sign, which is one of a couple in Radford, and the Radford Theater. A little bit north is Dude's Drive-In and a sign for the Starlight Theater. And in Christiansburg, we had a Denny's, our third Starlight on the trip. And then again north on US 11, we have the Blue Jay Motel. And as we get into Roanoke, just south of downtown, we got the Brandon Theater. And then just north of downtown is the Little Chef restaurant, which is a Valentine, looks like a double Valentine, which has been greatly remodeled inside. A little south of Natural Bridge is the Buchanan Theater in Buchanan, Virginia, along with across the street from a neat looking sign for a soda fountain. And then up in Lexington is the Southern Inn restaurant, and then just down the road from that is an old Pure Oil station, now in other use. Up in Staunton is the Visual Light Theater. And then we have a bunch of stuff up in Harrisonburg, Virginia. We have these two neat signs, the L&S Diner, a neon ice cream cone which looks to be a chain or a little small chain of ice cream places, and a sign for Glenn's. And as it got dark again, up in Winchester, just south of there, is the Echo Village. But what we came for in Winchester was the Triangle Diner, and it was time to eat. This O'Mahony Diner really looks nice. And then up by the Maryland border is this old restaurant that's not doing business anymore. And then we took a side trip over to Charlestown, just a little bit to the east on Maryland Route 51. And we got Fagan's Jewelers. And then just south in US 40, the Rainbow Diner, a mountain view. But we got back onto US 11 and headed to Hagerstown, and unfortunately a Snow White Grill was closed. So we hopped on the highway and ended up at the West Shore Diner in Lemoyne, a suburb of Harrisburg. So I hope you enjoyed this trip and come back for more.